is Jeremy Haskell with jobsintheus.com, and we're here at the Omni Mount Washington Hotel in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire for the second annual Strategic HR New England Conference. And I'm joined now by Adam Alter, who's an assistant professor of marketing at NYU and the author of Drunk Tank Pig. And you're going to be giving a keynote on the behavior of economics, of human behavior.
Right, yeah.
And so give us a little bit of the key takeaways of your keynote speech.
Well, I'm going to start by talking about the assumptions about how people think. And a lot of the assumptions based on simple economic approaches to understanding the way humans think and behave suggest that they're rational, perfectly rational, that they make sense of all the information in the same way as a computer might. And I'm going to suggest that that's not true, and there are some deviations from that assumption that make a lot of sense and that do a much better job of describing how people think. So I'm going to talk a little bit about incentives, how incentives sometimes work differently from how we might think if we were perfectly rational actors. I'm going to talk about the nature of choice, so when you give people in an HR setting a lot of choices, that can sometimes backfire and how that might happen. And I'll talk a little bit about a number of other issues, like how you can improve well-being just by introducing a couple of small changes in the workplace. So I'll talk about a few different issues, some of which touch on the book and some of which are a little bit different from what I talk about in the book.
Yeah, no, it's very fascinating, and I'd imagine, especially at an event like this, which is dealing with the senior level folks, right, those people really want to look at the logical behavior. So what are some of the challenges that you hear back from some of the senior leaders when you introduce these concepts?
Yeah, I think the biggest challenges are that so many of the ideas that I introduce are counterintuitive. So you really have to get around what you imagine the world to be like. So the one basic idea is that you increase incentives and that'll lead to people behaving more in the way that you're hoping they'll behave. And actually, very often that's just not true. So I'll talk a little bit about those perverse effects, that sometimes you give people more money, they do less of something. Sometimes you impose a fine and they do more of that thing. And that's obviously very hard to get your head around. And it doesn't make sense to people who've been trained, as all of us have, in this very sort of standard approach to the way we think people behave.
And taking that approach and those kind of counterintuitive opportunities, what are some of the opportunities that these strategic level people have in terms of being an HR leader or people manager? How can they take advantage of those kinds of things?
Yeah, well, the good news is I think that a lot of these interventions are incredibly inexpensive, which is really nice. I mean, it's tough when people say to you, here is an intervention, it's going to be expensive, but it'll have good outcomes. The beauty of a lot of what I discuss is that it's often very simple. It involves small tweaks, sometimes simply reframing a question or an issue. And just by reframing the way people think of the issue, you can change their behavior. So it's ultimately low cost, but with very high benefits, which I think makes it very attractive.
I'm sure that'd be very attractive to a lot of our leaders here today. So thank you very much, Adam, for joining us for a few minutes, and looking forward to your talk.
Thank you.